My wife cheated on me and wanted a divorce, asking for half of everything. I stayed calm and agreed. Unbeknownst to her, all my assets were in my dad's name. This happened a few years ago when I met Claudia. She was beautiful, charming, and captivated me with her infectious laughter. We got married quickly, maybe too fast, and for a time, everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. From the beginning, my dad had advised me to be careful with my assets. We come from a hard-working family that had managed to amass a good fortune over the years. My father was always very shrewd in business and instilled in me the importance of protecting what we had built. So, following his advice, everything I had, from the house we lived in to the cars and the bank accounts, was in his name. All this without Claudia knowing. At first, I had no reason to distrust her. She was my wife, the woman I planned to spend the rest of my life with. But over time, things started to change. Claudia began to spend more time away from home, always with the excuse that she was busy with work or out with friends. What really raised my suspicions was when she became too interested in our finances. She started asking me exactly how much I was earning, how much things cost, and whether we had insurance in case of emergencies. One day, I decided to follow her after she told me she was going to a work meeting. It turns out that the meeting was at the most expensive restaurant in the city, but she was not alone. I saw her having dinner with another man, laughing and being much more affectionate than she had been with me in months. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces at that moment, but I didn't let anger blind me. I knew that if I acted rashly, I could lose everything. Instead of confronting her immediately, began to gather evidence. I hired a private investigator to follow Claudia and confirm my suspicions. For weeks, he sent me photos and videos of the two of them together, holding hands, kissing, and entering hotels. It was evident that Claudia was cheating on me, and the worst part was that she didn't seem to care whether I found out or not. Finally, the day came that would change everything. One night, when I came back from work, Claudia was waiting for me in the living room. She had that cold, calculating look that I had already learned to recognize. She told me she was no longer happy in our marriage, that she had met someone else, and that she wanted a divorce. But not only that, she also wanted half of everything. I remember how my stomach turned when she said that. I knew she wasn't asking out of necessity, but out of greed and spite. She was convinced that she would take a large part of my money and properties, believing they belonged to her. But what Claudia didn't know was that everything she wanted was not really in my name. I decided to go with the flow, showing no emotion, and simply accepted the divorce. I told her that, of course, there was no problem, and that we would settle everything as soon as possible. What she didn't know was that I had a plan up my sleeve, one that I would put into action as soon as we signed the papers. That's when I dropped the bomb on him. With total calmness, I explained that the house, the cars, and all the properties Claudia thought were mine were actually in my father's name. Legally, she had no right to anything. I watched the lawyer's face pale as he realized they had signed a contract where they would not receive a single cent of what they truly wanted. The smile on Claudia's face earlier that day had been almost comical. When I told her I would accept the divorce without any problems, she looked so smug. She truly believed that everything we built together would be hers with just the snap of her fingers. Claudia thought she had me in her hands, convinced that she was smarter than me. We quickly agreed on the terms of the divorce. As a good, repentant husband, I gave her access to all our accounts. Or at least that's what she thought. The accounts in my name had only paltry amounts, just enough to appear to be the main ones. The real assets, the ones worth something, were safely in my father's hands, far from Claudia's reach. The day of the signing of the papers arrived. We found ourselves in her lawyer's office, a man who already saw me as easy prey. They began discussing the distribution of assets, how Claudia would keep the house, the cars, and half of our joint accounts. Claudia could not hide her satisfaction, while I maintained a facade of resignation. But inside, I was savoring every second, knowing the bomb I was about to drop. Claudia left with a triumphant smile, thinking she had one. I stayed with her lawyer a little longer, and he started giving me a lecture about being responsible and taking care of my finances in the future. That's when I revealed the truth. His face went pale as he realized their plans had completely fallen apart. That night, Claudia called me hysterical, screaming that I had cheated her and that I couldn't do this to her. I simply reminded her that she was the one who had decided to betray our marriage and had filed for divorce on her own. I told her I was sorry that things hadn't worked out as she expected, but there was nothing more I could do. The contract was signed and sealed. Legally, she had been left with absolutely nothing. The last I heard of Claudia, she was living in a small apartment, much more modest than the house we had shared. Her new love left her shortly after realizing she didn't even have a penny. Meanwhile, I moved on with my life, wiser and more cautious, but at least with the. Because sometimes life teaches you that not all that glitters is gold. And that revenge is best served cold.